Culture is the sum of all the forms of art, of love, and of thought, which in the course of centuries have enabled man to be less enslaved. And that is the quote by André Malraux, a French novelist, art historian, and statesman, an active supporter of Charles de Gaulle, President of France, and he served for 10 years as France's Minister of Cultural Affairs. Today's guest was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, the son of Italian immigrant parents. From humble beginnings, he became a cum laude graduate of the prestigious Pratt Institute School of Architecture in New York City and has lived and traveled extensively abroad. Today, Micheal Borginio is a noted design leader with a focus on community impacting, mission-driven architecture that supports and enhances the fabric of the city and furthers a fundamental belief that great design is the essential building block to vibrant, healthy communities. His work has garnered numerous awards nationally, most recently named the Wall Street Journal's Best Architecture of 2015 for the design of Columbus Museum of Art's Margaret M. Walter Wing. No doubt influenced by the rich culture of Brooklyn in the 70s and rooted in thousands of years of Italian architecture sensibility. Micheal has presented and written extensively on design and creative placemaking, and Micheal's 2012 TEDx Columbus talk entitled Looking Over the Overlooked took the audience on a journey to discover new ways to reimagine cities. When not doing TED Talks or designing award-winning museums, Mr. Borginio can be found escorting his daughters to Buckeye games or pumpkin patches, or perhaps even dancing to his favorite DJs. Welcome, Mr. Borginio.
Great to be here, Ria.
Okay, so I don't say this very often, but I was wrong. Your dad really did take your guys' van to Europe when you were a kid and did the cross-country trip, and now I'm thinking I want to do this. But can you tell our listeners about this trip so that they can get a little bit acclimated with your savoir-faire?
Wow, how far do you want me to go into it?
Because we have plenty of time.
Well, so my dad is originally from Sicily. He came here in the 60s. And it was important to him. There were two things that he wanted to spend money on, and that was education and travel. And so we would take trips, and generally they were unconventional because we didn't have much money, so we had to stretch the dollar as far as possible. One of the trips involved him doing the calculus on how much it would cost for us to go and spend time in Europe, Northern Europe and Italy. And he looked at hotel costs and all that, and he said, you know, there's got to be a different solution. This large Dodge Ram van. And he said, I can ship that to Rotterdam from Newark, New Jersey, and we can live in the van, and that's going to be a lot cheaper then. So you guys will get a European vacation, but you're going to have to do it on different terms.
Right, because there's 5 of you.
Yes, there are 5 of us. Yeah. So on this particular trip, there were 3 Borginio boys and then a guest.
Okay.
So the guest had to be subjected to this alternate reality. So we shipped the van to Rotterdam, and we go to pick it up, and the battery was dead. And so that started our adventures. In the van was packed, because there was a hidden compartment, was food, toiletries, extra clothing, utensils, all kinds of things that you would need on a road trip. All stowed away. This is pre 9/11 and all that. So obviously there's a little more latitude there. So we begin this journey through Europe in this van, and literally we were living in the van, occasionally down by a river.
Chris Farley.
Yes,
Nice.
occasionally, near a fountain or something like that. And it had New York plates on it, and it was it was a 4-cylinder van, not much power, not diesel, regular gasoline. And so we used this to kind of bounce around all these northern European towns, eventually making our way down toward Italy. But between Italy and Northern Europe, we hit a little bit of a snag in that we decided to take a shortcut, and that shortcut actually ended up being the High Alp Pass through the Alps, which started off great. It was beautiful, it was scenic. My dad was not happy about this, and he reminded me of that every time we sort of picked up a couple of feet. But slowly, the van started to ascend the mountain. And as there was less and less oxygen, there was less and less power in the van, and there was still all us guys and our stuff and our stowage, basically. So the further we get up, the more the car is choking to a point where the engine almost gave at a certain point.
Wow.
And it was a pretty harrowing experience. Anyway, a lot of stuff happened between then.
Did you have to get out and push?
Oh, you know where this is going, don't you? So yeah, so this is where it gets bad.
Okay.
So, my dad immediately he became really angry with the rest of the car. That was his thing. He was on a mission to like take someone's head off,
right?
Mostly mine, because I was sitting next to him. So we stopped the van. We got out. We let it cool off while we looked at a glacier. There was a glacier sitting out in sort of the gap in this valley. The van cooled off a little bit. We got back in. It was getting late. We needed to make it to Italy that night. And we started up the hill again. And for a little while, it was fine. But then the engine started sputtering. And the engine was screaming. It was like a screeching sound at full bore. But it was moving like this, like in snail's pace while it's screaming up the hill. So my dad, he has a very heavy accent. And he said, okay, we got to lose weight. We got to lose the weight. And so we're looking around at each other like, what does that mean? Like, oh, let's start throwing stuff out. He goes, no. Everything's important in the car. One of you have to jump out. You have to go.
Yeah, you, meaning you?
Yeah, one of us. So we had a guest who was kind of annoying. And we said, well, why doesn't the guest jump out? And he goes, no, the guests don't jump. So he says, one of you got to go first. So we throw the doors open on the van, right? And so these doors are open, and we're going up this hill, and the van is screaming, and it's going like, I don't know, maybe 15 miles an hour. And it was like the scene in Apocalypse Now when the helicopter door was open, and they're flying in, and like Wagner was playing, and like you could see the sky, and the wind was blowing. And so my brother Rob's, he's a little bit more of an adventurer than the rest of us, and he said, well, I'll go first. And I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, well, I'm going to jump running forward so that when I hit the ground, So he jumps out and he hits the ground, and like all that went to shit to hell.
Yeah.
Because he hit the ground and started flipping and flailing, and he was like rolling down the mountain. So my father's like, oh, we got a little more uptick, but we need more. So someone else has got to go, and so that someone else was me. And so I jumped out, and I said, well, that didn't work, and I'm just gonna jump out straight sideways. Sure enough, the same thing happened to me. It just hit the floor, arms flailing, rolling down the hill. So we're laying on the road on this mountain at however many thousands of feet, and the van is moving, and the annoying guest sticks his head out and says, "Your dad said to catch up. The van's moving fast enough." So the van's taking off. We start running. We forgot that we were so high up on the mountain.
Oh yeah.
We got like 5 steps, and we both landed on the ground.
Wow.
Just completely out of breath. And so. But of course, we're on the ground, and there's a tunnel at the top of we're about to crest the mountain, and there's a tunnel we're supposed to go through. And all these cars coming out of the tunnel. Yeah, we were so close. That's why he wanted us to jump.
Yeah.
We were so close. These cars pulled over to the side off the road because they couldn't stop laughing. And
Really?
at the same time of us dumb Americans laying on the pavement.
Yeah.
With this van with New York license plates with pinstriping and all that kind of cheese on it. With the doors open, kind of barreling up the road.
If there was social media, that would have went viral for sure.
I know, it was.
For sure.
Those were the days. So, anyway, we finally caught up to the van. He was able to slow down enough that it was flat enough that we could catch up to him, get in the van, and then ride in complete silence all the way down to Trieste, Italy, where we had relatives, where we could finally have a decent shower.
Oh, wow. Wow. So you made it.
We made it.
And did the van make it back to New York?
So the van made it all the way to Sicily. We drove it all the way to Sicily.
Wow.
And I have relatives there, and they washed our van for us for a couple of years. And then my dad went back again, and he did the trip in reverse. This time with a different number of our siblings, my sister, my brother, a couple of cousins. And then when they got to Rotterdam, they shipped it back to Newark, and they flew out of Schiphol and went to New York. And then a couple of years later, the van, just imagine what this van has been through.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
been through hell and back, right? And not treated very well. And so in our neighborhood was fairly well controlled by the mafia. And so there were always inevitably car chases or something like that, whether it's a stolen car or like some kind of deal gone wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway, the van was parked on the street, and my dad had gotten rear-ended a few times on the FDR Drive, which by cabs, which is an inevitable.
It happens, right? If you don't start too fast, it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
They're going to start nudging you forward. They're going to tell
Exactly.
you move, right? Yeah.
So he was, so his insurance kept going up, even though he was rear-ended. His insurance went up.
Sure.
So he was parked on the street, and there obviously was a chase. I mean, they were chasing, and at that time, the Pathfinder was like the giant SUV. Like it was like the start of the whole SUV
Okay.
craze. And they were chasing this. The cops were chasing this Pathfinder through the neighborhood, and the Pathfinder just it ended its journey. The back of my dad's van completely obliterated the rear end. This hellish sound. He comes outside. It's the middle of the night. And he looks at the van and he said, "Okay, no insurance. I'm going to fix this myself."
Oh, no way.
So, son of a bitch. Yeah. So the next morning he comes out. Oh, I should say my dad was a union electrician by trade. He was
Okay.
an electrician for 35 years. And he came out the next day with a Sawzall. Do you know what a Sawzall is? It's a reciprocating saw. Looks like a gun. It's got a blade at the front of it. And he proceeds to cut the van in half.
No way.
Yes, he's
No way.
cutting. Yes, he cuts the skin, and he was very careful with the wires.
How did the blades survive it? Because I've used those before. The blades aren't that heavy duty.
Oil.
Oh, okay.
That was the other great. Squirt oil, cut. Squirt oil, cut. Anyway, he cut through this whole thing, and he proceeds to rebuild the entire
Wow.
back half out of plywood and 2x4s, like framing lumber. And it had a gate in the back that you can kind of it was like a pickup truck.
Wow.
It was like a twisted El Camino. And he pop riveted a big piece of sheet metal on the back and cut a hole out of there for a window. And I've got photographs of this.
I gotta see these.
Yeah,
I gotta see these.
It was he stained all the wood.
Wow.
It was beautiful. He decorated around the wheel well with 2x4 trim and around the gas cap with 2x4 trim. One of the things he didn't take into account is water collection in the sort of back, and so he had to resort to putting over a blue tarp so that it wouldn't collect too much water.
Yeah.
So here, he's driving around in this, and he called it the Woody. That was
The
his
Woody?
name. The Woody. That was the name for the truck, and he drove it around with this blue tarp over it all around Brooklyn for years until someone who was a friend of his, who was a landscape painter,
Yeah.
said, when the urge hits me, I just want to get out and paint. And he said, I love your van because I can just jump in the back and wherever I am, get off the ground and start painting. So he sold it to a painter who
Really?
who used to just set up his easel in the back and as the mood.
That's
took him.
incredible. You're
So-
going to be telling so many great stories to your grandkids.
Yes, I've got. Yes, my kids don't believe half the story.
I didn't either.
I have enough siblings to back me up here.
I mean, right, though, that's how it started, was that, like, you told me to start, like, I don't believe it. There's no way. And he's like, no, it's true. And I was like, okay, I gotta hang out with this guy. Okay, so these incredibly colorful and unique experiences with your dad, and how you see the world, and we discuss cultures and how cultures, when we grow up, they shape our perceptions and our personalities. And what do you think these experiences have affected you in terms of? Do you think today's culture would treat these experiences differently, would look at them differently? Because back then it was just like this magical kid environment. This guy could build the back of a van. So today's culture is all about safety and normalization and standardization. So how do you think culture would look at these, or how is like in retrospect, how has the world treated your dad in these experiences?
I mean, I think the context was completely different. I mean, and I would say culturally, like, I think it's dependent on like who's having the experiences. So I could imagine that children of recent immigrants are having similar experiences that we don't know about, right?
That's correct.
But a lot of our kids are growing up within the context of we're second generation.
It's true.
And it has become more normalized and prescriptive to the point where they look at things as weird. The children, we really didn't have a choice, right?
That's true.
We kind of had to go along with it. So it was all we knew. So it wasn't until later that I realized how bizarre my childhood was, but it was fun. But I think it was there was a greater acceptance of risk because there was nothing to lose. Like, my dad came here with nothing, and so there was. I mean, he could go back to having nothing and probably be comfortable with it. And so there was not a whole lot to lose. All he had to do was provide for his kids, and he was going to do it no matter what the situation. So he was going to figure out a way, and that's the beauty of immigrants. Is that they figure out ways to operate that are alternate realities or economies. I mean, he had a whole different economy based on barter and trade.
Because they have to.
They had to. It was a necessity thing. And so I think that kind of like DIY mentality just passes itself down. True. And you get influenced by it. But at the same time, completely understanding that you're probably not going to do the same things with your kids because, their context is completely different.
Right. And I like what you said about like culturally they're different because they have to take risk and also because they have nothing else to lose too. That's a great point. Okay, so Italy's architecture that we touched upon a little bit almost spans 3,000 years and has been renowned for differences in style, from Etruscan to ancient Roman to Romanesque, Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, Neoclassical, Art Nouveau, and modern architecture. What part of this aestheticism from your Italian culture did you bring with you to your work? For example, you mentioned in your TED Talk Giovanni Pranesi books.
Yes.
And they were around when you were growing up because your dad was into art and had all these books laying around. So what do you think this heritage, has it had an influence on you, this culture, in how you design your work?
Oh, absolutely. And I probably should add, my dad was a union electrician by training, but he was an artist. He was a painter, he was a sculptor, he was an inventor. I mean, he was constantly coming up with new ways to do things. He built us our own exercise equipment, electrical tubing and pitching machines, sleds that we got really hurt on, but were really fast and really fun.
You have to write a book about this stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and so we had a lot of, obviously, books, and inevitably, it makes its way into your imagination. Like the things that you see and so when you see these sort of drawings or these paintings, it's sort of like the Piranesi drawings, like you can imagine the whole world there, and you start to identify how, not just what it looks like as a two-dimensional thing, but like what does it feel like to be there? How cool would it be to be? And I didn't realize this at the time. I mean, we used to play with Legos too, and we're always making things, but you don't realize it. Like, all that stuff was very subconscious. It wasn't like, I'm aware of, my desire to be immersed in a Piranesi drawing. It's just like, you think back on it, like, as a kid I had this kind of emotional response to it that suggested that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And so that very much, and I didn't realize how much of a gift that was that we were given. Like, and that's why the arts are so damn important.
Yeah.
Because you really you can't appreciate how much of the gift that has been given until much later.
Absolutely.
In your life. And so, there were just some fundamental things that kind of trickled down to me, and like in a Caravaggio painting or a Vermeer, like the quality of light. And so and in the Piranesi drawings as well, like, wow, that light is amazing. And then you would see, like, if you were like waiting on a subway platform and there's an air vent, you would see this kind of mysterious gray light coming down. And you're like, that's like kind of like those
start
paintings.
to make those associations.
Yeah. And so then you start to think, what is that? What would it be? So as you get older, a little more sophisticated, you go off to a university, you start being taught tools. You're like, there actually are ways, there are methods by which I can get an effect like this, whether it's through drawing or actually making something. And so slowly, like, over time, it was like this kind of accumulation of like experiences that ended up becoming like your sort of the way you view the physical world around you. So there was one other point I wanted to make. The blah blah blah. I can't remember.
Okay, so the culture, the Italian culture.
Oh, that was the other thing. Okay, time.
Yeah.
Time. We are so impatient, and I think this is probably an issue for architecture too. Like, everyone wants to fast forward to being like Frank Gehry or something like that, and I think there's a confusion between like playing games with form and really understanding the essential nature of space and form. And so, like, one of the things that I was definitely influenced by is the idea of like elementalism, like how like something is timeless, not in a cliche way. It's sort of like you figure out what is a universal experience for most people, when it comes to natural lighting or materials or how you move through space, like how people move, or how they proceed through space. There's a time element to that is very important in architecture, and weaving all that together. Like you have to be like a maestro of an orchestra. Like think about the lighting, and okay, when you walk in, this is kind of what you see and what you feel, and so you're like a cinematographer, right?
Yeah.
You're storyboarding this film, and this film happens to end up being a building.
Yeah.
And so it's a very human-based approach to thinking about designing spaces and places for people. So
And romantic, I might add, which
yes,
definitely goes back to your roots.
exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly. There's a sensual quality to it
Yeah.
because we are human beings. Like as much as our intellect sometimes
Yeah.
tells us not, we are these, sweaty, hairy beings that feel things, see things, hear things, and sometimes we lose track of our senses,
Yeah.
and our senses never lie, and
true.
especially our essence.
Yeah. So as a follow-up to that, and you alluded to this a little bit when you talked about how the arts are important, and we talked about this book earlier in our show, how important it is to cultivate that sense of history and appreciation for the arts and culture like your dad did with you. And then, about how you also talked about this, how you were treated for how he treated you when you were arrested for trespassing in New York City in the subway tunnels, because you enjoyed traveling through them. And instead he offered you the creative outlet. So what do you do with three girls, and they're of different generations, so that our listeners can get some contemporary ideas, like how can we impart some of those cultural appreciation for the arts and that exploration with our children?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, yes has to be the answer to everything. It has to, and why? Asking questions. I think one thing I've encouraged my kids to do is whenever a situation arises that raises a question on their behalf, I always try to encourage them to question any previously held assumptions they have about it. Whether or not that ever sinks in, probably eventually it will.
Yeah.
But I ask them to be very curious and inquisitive about life, and I think curiosity fundamentally and creativity go hand in hand. I mean, that's where the arts are important.
Right.
So obviously in our house we've got pieces that I've made. They've got paintings that my dad made. We have paintings from other people we know. We have things we've bought. We have books. And so we model like that stuff is part of our life. We don't see it as we don't have decorative things. We have things that are meaningful.
Nice.
Because that's where I think people lose a sense of connection to art, is that they see it as some other thing that happens. But as I grew up with it, it was part of what you did. It was it was woven into life, and that it's not just visuals as food,
Yeah.
and all that. So, I try to get them to think, have a critical eye, and develop a good visual literacy. So they'll always ask me, "Hey, Dad, what do you think of that, and why? Why? So why is that good or why is that bad? Or why is that successful and the other one's not?" And they've started as they've gotten older asking those questions. So it means that they were kind of paying attention.
Okay.
Because I would go and I would say, "Oh, that thing is," I had this whole game I would play with them, well, not necessarily with them, but we would look at weird conditions and walking around the neighborhood. So there were these balconies that were not really balconies. They were just railings stuck on a wall. We called them falconies, fake balconies. And so I would always point things like that out. But I don't know that they were paying attention to that, but maybe they were.
I think
maybe
they were.
They were kind of breaking it down now.
Somewhere.
And they point things out and say, "That's kind of odd.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?"
Yeah.
I'm I don't know. Why would you do that?
That's good. And what I really like about what you were saying is bringing it into your home, because traditionally you'll ask someone that and they'll say, "Oh, take them to the museums, take them to see a concert," but having that as part of your everyday surroundings and not just buying something from Pier 1 or whatever, going and bringing art into your home from a local artist. It doesn't have to be, it could be something you made or your parents made, is a really great way to have that around you. That's a great answer.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be beautiful. It's just there has to be a story.
Yeah.
I mean, every object has a story.
Right.
And so this a story sometimes is more beautiful than the thing.
Right. Then it connects you with your culture. Okay, so you say about yourself, and I'm a lucky guy that lives a charmed life and loves to be surrounded by art, design, music, travel, good food, and good people. And at the time when you wrote this, I also have two of the most amazing children. Well, today you have three.
Yes.
And you're now in a new relationship, new marriage with another child. And when we talk about culture, we talked about how it can mean pretty much anything to any group that has commonality. So my question is, what is the difference in the culture of, let's say, a nuclear family versus a blended step family? And what can you offer those who are trying to navigate this cultural space from the point of view of someone who's doing that right?
Well, thank you for saying that I'm doing it right.
Yeah, because I see many pictures of your family together
Yes,
in the
yeah,
blended
yeah.
situation, and it's wonderful.
I think, so a couple of things. I think it's priority. Like, so if the children are the priority, and like you say, everything else is stuff that adults have to work out.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of it. I think it helps, like negotiation is a big part of it, and kind of compromise is a huge one. I mean, I think that respect over years of having relationships, I mean, it always depends on the relationship, but anybody that's been in a relationship long enough, there's always going to be some respect there that it was always there before and it's going to continue to be there. And I think the individual that's kind of at the center of the whole situation needs to model the best behavior. And it's all about the behavior you model, and things that you choose to say or choose not to say are very important. So that the respect, understanding, negotiation, and compromise. I mean, it does help that the mother of my two older children and Sarah, Lori and Sarah, they get along very well.
That's wonderful.
I wonder sometimes if they get along with each other, but I get along with either of them. But it helps to have them on the same page.
It does.
I think it takes a while
Sure.
to get on that page. And obviously, when you're in a relationship where there's someone new there, and a new mom comes along, I mean, any human being is going to feel territorial about that.
Yeah.
And so, but it's how you choose. When that emotion hits you,
Yeah.
it's like, asking yourself, well, what would be threatening about this to me? Like, most people don't think about the upside. Like, here's a potentially nice person that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm lucky. I'm in a situation where there are two very nice people who get along, but it's not always the case. But then
Sure.
that puts the onus on the person who's in the middle to try to model the behavior as best as possible.
Who's that, you?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that was,
okay,
yeah. So,
okay.
so you kind
So
of
model.
model and kind of negotiate and try to hold it together.
Yeah, and I think another important point is typically it's not going to be like that from the get. Like, people need to be patient. Some of the emotions need to simmer down a little bit in the transitions. Because in the beginning, sometimes they get quite ugly, but that doesn't mean it always has to be that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so Micheal, Mr. Borginio, in your TED Talk, you also talk about the architecture of Brooklyn in the 70s. And you describe it as not the culture of hipsters and irony, but as the culture of warriors. And your neighborhood,
The warriors.
Yeah, the warriors, and your neighborhood as your turf, as you described it. And I want to talk about this warrior culture. And we had it too in Bay Ridge, where I grew up amongst a lot of Greeks on 86th and 3rd. Was all this culture of violence and vice around you what led you to run around those subway tunnels as an escape?
Yeah, so I think it was inevitable. Like, my parents did the best job they could. My mother was a very, very devoted, mother, and she cared for us deeply. But at that time, like, you could have the best, and I attribute turning out okay with the influence of my mother to keep us on the straight and narrow, because my dad was really not around much.
Yeah, because he had to support 5 kids,
Yeah.
right?
But inevitably, like of the 5 of us, I probably got myself into situations more so than any of my siblings that would, raise some hair on back of a parent's neck, and 75% of which they still don't know about, and they're not going to, and hopefully they don't listen to this.
Okay.
But, the point is that culture, like the influence, it was like this, like you more excitement you see, the more you want. It's like a drug. So
It's true.
So like, I look, like I tell my kids sometimes, like, oh, I feel bad because I feel like you're growing up in a sensory deprivation tank.
Yeah.
Because everything's so safe and easy, and like you can walk or ride your bike. I mean, there are different kinds of threats now.
Sure.
But the threats then were like right in your face.
Yeah.
Like, you never knew if you were going to get jumped or beat
true.
up, and we got jumped and beat up all the time.
Yes, you
right?
did. Absolutely.
But it created this desire for an adrenaline rush, and like I didn't need drugs or anything. Like I'm like it was too intense. It was intense already.
Intense.
I mean, the mafia was like full bore then.
Yep.
Like people were dead on the street. I mean, you heard gunshots, you saw dead
Yep.
people, all that stuff. And so it just programmed you to like your mind's all of a sudden needs this constant.
Yeah.
And so that in a way was kind of an ultimate thrill.
Yeah.
Running around in a dark tunnel with electrified tracks, homeless people, and trains going by.
Yep.
It was pretty wild. So
Yep.
and then doing art down there.
Yeah, yeah. So was your escape from that culture above ground a little bit, but a different kind of thrill, and one where you were able to explore your art?
Yes, it was. It was kind of like hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a dangerous kind of like what is the most ultimate way to like do a piece of art at night, surrounded by dogs and cops and all that stuff.
Right.
Like it was a thrill. It was a huge adrenaline rush, and part of it was like, our home life was very safe and nurturing, and I just felt like I was always looking for action of some sort.
Right.
But I regret it in a way because it was a time when I could have formed deeper relationships with my siblings, but I was always off trying to find a high somewhere else.
Well, it makes me think about some cultures contemporarily, and even like parts of the country where they live amongst vices of violence and danger, and they do turn to drugs because they didn't have a subway. And I wonder, like, what are some things that we can create in some of those places where the opioid crisis has hit, and so on and so forth, where kids can go and still feel like they've got that thrill, but it's not attached to a drug. But
yeah, I mean, that's a complicated one because it's like there's a systematic issue with, I think, the opioid crisis, as much so with the crack crisis.
Right.
And it was who it was targeting.
Yes.
And it was definitely targeting people along racial lines and socioeconomic lines, and it still does. And so then the trickle up kind of effect of the opioids is that, well, they're pills and everybody takes pills, and so and that pill may be a gateway to you injecting yourself with something, but the economic divide is probably as troubled as the economy was back then. My dad even says this today. He's super conservative, by the way, so I'm not gonna get to that.
Okay.
But, he said even back then, I still felt like you could get ahead. Like you could have a life. You could not feel like you're in hock.
It wasn't, the system wasn't as game.
Yeah, and it was almost easier to DIY in a system like that because. So
you weren't regulated to death.
That meant you could have some extra money, and there was a lot less publicity about drug use in anything but like underserved communities, and it created like the whole drug war idea. Created this bizarre like us and them world.
It's true
at the time. And it's a lot blurrier now. It's like everybody is, you don't know who's quite, has issues with addiction. But jobs are a huge part of it. And then activities for young people, like I think the suburbs have a huge part to do with it as well, because like I said, there was so much excitement that I didn't really need. Right. And maybe that's just the way I'm genetically predisposed, because addiction is a completely different issue. Yeah. But if the kids have stuff to do that's really cool and exciting, I mean, that's all they want, right? They want something to do.
They do.
And a lot of times, it's just easier if you've got a lot of disposable income to buy your way to a sort of quick,
And they want stuff to do that isn't necessarily attached to sports too. You know?
Exactly.
And especially in the suburbs, like you mentioned, there's it's like a cultural wasteland. I'm not, it's a very vapid kind of existence, and that's why a lot of those kids kind of fall into that. Okay, let's fast forward to today. Recently, it was announced that your firm Design Group, they announced the groundbreaking of the state-of-the-art development to house Columbus State Community College School of Hospitality Management and Culinary Arts, a $33 million project. And you were quoted as saying in the article, and I quote, Through our mission-driven approach to design, we worked closely with the college to develop a signature facility for a nationally recognized culinary program that is uniquely suited to both its location on Columbus State's campus and the college's mission, vision, and core values. So is this basically saying that you'll be taking into consideration the culture of the college itself, and how does one put that into a blueprint, and also how are you going to manage to incorporate designs of the chef culture?
Okay, great. Great question. Excellent question. So, when we talk about our approach to design, I think the thing that it's important to understand is that what we really try to do is to reveal like DNA, like essence, right? Like really doing a deep dive with a client to understand who they are and what they are better than like they may see themselves as.
Okay.
Maybe some clients have a better idea. So that's what's hard about that is that that's intangible. Like, how do you give shape to that? How do you reflect that, and how do you reflect the spirit of an institution or any client? And it comes from a very kind of committed and deep like relationship with them, asking them very like not being satisfied with 3 questions or 4 questions, but asking 10 questions deep to really kind of get to the essence of it. So then it's our job to figure out ways to make it specific to them through thinking about where the building is located in that context. It's taking who they're serving. So I actually rather call it impact-driven design because it's about who you're serving and like working backwards from there to what the building. I know this sounds like
No.
No,
there's a book I read, Competing Against Luck, which always talks about thinking it in that direction, which is what Amazon did. It's always about the customer and like looking and going backwards through that. Yeah.
Right. So, but a lot of conversations with the chefs and like them talking about what it's like to be a chef and what it feels like to be a chef. And I came to discover that chefs love to be watched while they're working. That's why those like open kitchens are so popular. Because every chef wants to be a celebrity.
Yeah, and all those shows. I mean, that's a lot of work.
And so foregrounding their work and like exposing it became a big part of it. And so a lot of what you'll see when you're in the building is like these very kind of there's glass everywhere.
Nice.
You can see everything that the chefs are doing in different types of kitchens. And since it's a hospitality school as well, it's then creating spaces that enable them to like meet and greet people in a way that you would expect them to walk to a hotel. And I think the other part of it is the idea of a collaborative culture and how they work between their kind of different practices, how they influence each other. So we designed things in the building that did that. We had these bridges that go across the space that have seating and kind of study and gathering areas, and we kind of nicknamed them the Collabridges because that's what you did on them. And so, and that kind of joined different parts of the building together. So that is very specific. Like that building would not work for any other. I mean, it's very specific to that client. It looks like it belongs to them and no one else, and it looks like it should belong on that campus and nowhere else.
Brilliant. So you were also part of the renovations at the Franklin Park Conservatory, including their new entrance and their children's garden. Have you been to the children's garden yet? I haven't gotten there yet.
Yes, I have.
Okay, and I'm sure
with Eleanor.
Oh, how cute! How cute! And I've also heard that the library is offering free passes to the conservatory that you can rent with your library card. So, so tell us about some of the considerations that you had in terms of the culture of a child. Did you observe your daughter? Did you think about some of those? Did some of that go into designing it?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. And we partnered with a fantastic landscape architect on the project, Terra Design, out of Pittsburgh. They solely do children's gardens, and so we were responsible mostly for the structures in this space. But I will say, when they were trying to figure out the distance between footprints for an 18-month-old child in the concrete that they were going to stamp, they had Eleonora walk a couple of paces, and so I don't know if they exactly used her footprint, but that is definitely one of those like very tangible things that you can say, that's fun. But in terms of like the culture of a child, it's like we had to kind of change the way that we think. We've done a lot of school projects, like K through 12 projects as well. But something like the conservatory, it has everything to do with scale, right? So the scale of a child and what they see where they are is completely different than how we perceive things. And so we try to make things do things that were both scaled to adult activity, but somehow had to also be scalable to a child.
Yeah.
So let's say like there was an education pavilion and it needed a tall ceiling because it needed the air to flow and it had to be dramatic and all that. There were other areas that were associated with that were a little more cubby-like, there were kind of like seats that were kind of clumped around one corner, or alcoves where the sink heights are different. It just feels a little more childlike. And there are a lot more sort of playful elements in there as well. But children are very tactile, and so realizing that having lots of different kinds of materials, not all in one place, but like there's stone, there's some wood, and so the idea that you can see, feel, and touch a lot of different things. But I have to credit the landscape architect and the children's garden designer for a lot of the thought behind the landscape elements and moving to the space. Some of the more fanciful things, like the little elf houses and that kind of thing, were all, and actually those were all artists.
Wow.
So actually sorry I forgot about that, but most of the installations in there outside of the actual architecture were artists.
Wow.
Who created really great moments where children can have really interesting and sort of, because you forget, we're not in their heads anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, true. Even if you have a child that's that age, you're always wondering what in the world they're thinking.
Yeah, it's true.
And so I thought those artists did a really great job of capturing their fans.
Great. We look forward to going. Okay, so you've redesigned most of the cultural institutions of our city, and one can say you are personally woven into the fabric of our culture. What is next for Micheal Borginio, aside from a bronze sculpture that we will be erecting of you someday to honor all the cultural transformations you've given us over the years?
Oh, I'm not sure I want that. You mean what are my upcoming projects?
Yes, and your website if people want to go and check stuff out.
So, I'm very excited about, we worked on the master plan for the Ohio History Connections new collections facility. And as envisioned in the master plan, working with Ohio History Connection, who they had a clear vision of what they wanted to do differently.
They needed an update too.
Yes. And so basically think about it as a inverted storage facility for objects that the state holds in trust. And they're all our wonderful objects from around the state of Ohio. And remember I said earlier that the idea of the object tells a story. The idea is to give these objects that have been in a storage facility in the dark somewhere, give people access to it, and to invert that experience from it being an enclosed thing to it being kind of... So there are a lot of different ways you can do that. You can do it through technology. You can do it actually physically. You can do it through a docent. So we explored a lot of different ways to do it. And so we're at a stage now where we're competing for the project to move forward as an actual project. And so I'm very excited about that.
Awesome.
There are two other things that I've signed a non-disclosure for, so I cannot say. But they're very cool, and I'm very excited about them. And they could be pretty cool game changers for Columbus if they move forward.
Okay, maybe I can get you to tell me about it off the record.
Yes.
And what's your website for people to go kind of check you out?
It's www.designgroup.us.com.
Okay, and you have another office in Pittsburgh, or
yes, we have a Pittsburgh office. Our home base is here. We're about 62 people.
Very nice.
And we may be thinking about another city.
Okay. Last question. Your dad said this to you, and I get this from one of the quotes you put on your social pages.
No. I know which one you're going to say.
My son, if I give you one piece of advice, is this: never be anyone's, underling. What's another cultural nugget you received from your dad that you would like to share today with our listening audience? Okay,
cultural nugget, I'm not so sure, but I will say I could tell you why I became an architect.
Okay, perfect.
That has something to do with him. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not beating a dead horse, but we didn't have much when we were growing up. We had a neighbor who worked on Wall Street, a nice house, a nice car, nice clothes. So when I was younger, I told my dad, like, I want to be a stockbroker, and he said, no, you chase the money, you're never happy. You not chase the money, you're never happy. I'm like, all right, well that's convenient. Like we don't have anything, so that's a great narrative for you.
Yeah.
So as the years went on, like I discovered that I can draw and I can sculpt, like just like my dad. I didn't realize I had this talent, and and here it is. And so then I told him Dad, I know what I want to do. This was like when I was a teenager. I said I want to be an artist. I want to be a sculptor. It's like no. You'll starve. You'll never have any money. You don't want to be an artist. He said, why don't you be an architect? You make a little art and you make a little money.
Aww.
Everybody's happy. So
That's how you did it.
so it's like his practical side and his his sort of adventurous side came together in that moment.
Well, it looked like it worked out for you.
It did.
Good. Well, thank you, Ms. Borginio. We look forward to all of your next transformations, and we really appreciate your cultural renovations of our city.
Appreciate you having me. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks.